Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And tonight's concert is going to be lions, tigers, and bears, and rags, and blues, oh my, and much more. Well, looks like the stream is working okay on both Facebook and YouTube, so that's good news. We are getting a little bit of rain here in Durango today, but hopefully that won't affect anything too badly. It's more like a shower than a thunderstorm. We're going to do the Grizzly Bear Rag, which was written by George Botsford, the man who also wrote such hits as the Black and White Rag and Sailing Down Chesapeake Bay. And this is the instrumental version of it. It has 3 parts to it. One part is not in the song version, which was made famous by Sophie Tucker. And I haven't really played this too many times, but we're going to give it a shot. The Grizzly Bear Rag. And that's the Grizzly Bear Rag. Thank you very much. That was one of the very popular animal dances of the ragtime years. That tune came out in 1910, written by George Botsford, as I said, and made famous by Sophie Tucker. But the Grizzly Bear was an actual dance that people did, along with tunes or dances like the turkey trot and the bunny hug and the fox trot. The foxtrot lasted longer than all of the others and became almost a synonymous term for dancing to almost any type of popular music for decades. Well, I've written down some tunes that I plan to play tonight, and as always, I'm happy to take requests. And I thought the next one I might do is Fun Rag by Charles L. Johnson, one of the most prolific ragtime writers. He lived in Kansas City. And this is called Teasing the Cat, which is from about 1916. I don't even think I told you the first tune I played tonight was Kitten on the Keys, the great novelty by Zez Confrey. This is from several years earlier. Teasing the Cat by Charles L. Johnson. And that's Teasing the Cat. Thank you very much. Boy, I'm already getting some interesting requests here on YouTube. Bob Wills' Milk Cow Blues. I love that tune, but I've never played it. I don't know how it would come out as a piano solo, and I've never seen any piano sheet music for that. Not that I wouldn't love to try it. Each week I hope that I get some new listeners with my virtual concerts, and if you've never tuned in, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, and the information is in the postings on YouTube and Facebook. And don't forget to like the postings as well. It helps with the social media algorithms. I appreciate that. Yes, I do know the Teddy Bear's Picnic. I thought about playing that tonight, but you know, I played it last week because I did a food-themed concert. I'm not sure about playing that 2 weeks in a row. Bye Bye Blackbird, yes, I might do that tonight, as well as Tiger Rag. I knew that I would get multiple requests for that, so I'm planning on it a little bit later in the concert. You just have to stick around and I'll do that. Haven't really done any of the classic rags yet tonight, and there's a famous one that fits in with the animal theme. In a sense, it would have fit in with the food theme too. I don't think I played this last week. I can't even remember. We're going to do the Frog Legs Rag by James Scott, which dates from 1906, and it was the biggest selling piece of sheet music in John Stark's catalog outside of Maple Leaf Rag. It was this one, the Frog Legs Rag. That's the Frog Legs Rag. Luke also says, you're the only man I've seen who can rock a bow tie better than myself. Well, there's a little bit of a story to how I learned to tie bow ties. I think I I've already told you all this once before, but Johnny Maddox taught me to tie these bow ties, the famous ragtime player. And he had learned from an old black man named George when he was living in Minneapolis, which would have been in the 60s or 70s, I think. Johnny lived in Minneapolis. And this black man had been a butler for Johnny Green, the 1930s band leader and songwriter who wrote Body and Soul and Out of Nowhere, songs like that. So there's a little bit of a history behind it, a tradition. Let's see, what's next? Well, you know, it sounds funny to my ears right now to play this piano. This is a beautiful Melville Clark piano that has an Apollo player piano system in it. And it's one of the most beautiful uprights that I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Certainly the best one I've ever owned. But right now I'm playing at the Strater Hotel here in Durango 6 nights a week. And the piano in the bar has hardened hammers. They use lacquer on the hammers to give it kind of a rinky-tink sound. So it's very loud and bright. And right now as I'm playing, my fingers are not used to this piano. It's a funny sensation. It's like it's not loud enough, even though I know I'm probably playing too loud most of the time. It's funny how that works. And as such, maybe it's not a bad idea for me to play kind of a slow and beautiful rag, and it fits in with the animal tune theme. We're going to do rag by the great Joseph Lamb, one of the other classic ragtime writers from 1915, Ragtime Nightingale. so much, Ragtime, Nightingale. And if I did my job right, you should have been able to hear the birds in the trio of that piece. Oh, Luke is asking about doing a country night. I don't really do mainstream country music. It is not good for the piano because there's just not enough to the music. It's, relatively harmonically simple and so forth. But I already have sort of done that. And I think I might have mentioned you can still go back on YouTube and watch the night that I did. I think I called it Western songs mostly. Let me check both streams here. Oh, well, thanks everybody, and hi to Rick and Joe Carroll there in Texas. I've got a neat piece of music sitting here on the piano, written by Percy Winrick, who was from Joplin, Missouri, in that area, and was one of the great ragtime writers who wrote tunes like On Moonlight Bay and Put On Your Old Gray Bonnet. And this is called Snow Deer, and let me show you the cover again. It's funny, the cover of this music, the tune is called Snow Deer Rag, but I really do not see deer anywhere in the artwork. I see a couple of horses. They didn't take this music too seriously back then, and I don't think we should now either. And so, actually, I'm going to do a medley of two. We're going to put them together. Two tunes by Percy Winrick to make a little bit better piece of music for performance. And it's the Snow Deer Rag. Rag isn't really in the title, but it became known as the Snow Deer Rag because Joe Fingers Carr on Capitol Records, who was really Lou Bush, had a minor hit with this in the 1950s. And anyway, we're going to pair it with Rainbow by Percy Winrick. Snow Deer Rag. Thank you. And I think Amy figured it out. I'm absolutely sure you're right. Snow Deer must be the name of the native girl on the cover of the piece of music. Just like so many of the songs of the American songbooks, the big hits, it's always about a pretty girl. It's all the songs, either a happy song about a girl or a sad song. It all boils down to that. Well, don't be yeah. Fred Youngkins figured it out too. Snow Deer is the Native American girl's name. Don't be afraid to send in some requests for me too, folks. Please do, and hopefully I can get some of them in tonight. Unfortunately, I've never played Ragtime Oriole, and I don't know Alligator Crawl by heart either, but keep sending in the requests. Yeah, Chicken Chowder, I've never played that either. Sorry, Daryl. But keep sending in the requests now, because sometimes it might take me a minute to get to playing it, or you know, there's not one that I know by heart, and there's also a delay just because it takes a minute for the request to show up in my chat. So keep them coming in. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it. And in the meantime, I can play some more for you. Oh yeah, I'm going to do Lion Tamer Rag tonight. I've been working on that this week. I've never performed it before, and I'm going to do that, but I'm going to save it for the grand finale of the whole concert. Next on my list is the Blue Goose Rag. So let's do that. And I haven't been playing this that long, but it's one of the better rags, I think, by Charles L. Johnson. I've never seen a blue goose. If you ever do, let me know. This is from 1916. There's the Blue Goose Rag. Thank you, folks. Huh. That's funny. Alexander on Facebook says something about a boogie. Well, Rip me corsets off would be horrified. That's so funny. It's not boogie, it's just a little bit of a walking bass line that was certainly very common in ragtime. Ragtime was not played exactly the way it was written on the page. It was not treated like Bach. It was, with the exception of a couple of unusual pieces, music that was very clearly intended to be concert works like Ragtime, Nightingale, and Heliotrope Bouquet, Scott Joplin's Bethina. Most of it was very upbeat too. It was a misnomer in the 1970s during the revival of Scott Joplin's music from the movie The Sting. It became widely accepted that Scott Joplin should be treated like Bach and Beethoven, but it's really not historically correct at all. Plus, the music doesn't sound as good that way. Okay, let's do another animal. Let's do the rooster rag. I've been playing this more often lately. I've always loved it. The record from the 1950s of Wally Rose playing this is probably the best ever made. Even though it's on an out-of-tune piano, it's really unfortunate. Wally could play rags just great, just the way they were meant to be played, I think. And the Rooster Rag was written by Muriel Pollock, who became a very well-known novelty pianist and made records and piano rolls. And she was married to the songwriter Will Donaldson, who wrote Rialto Ripple's Rag with George Gershwin. Anyway, that's a little bit about Muriel Pollock, but here's Rooster Rag. And that's Rooster Rag. Thank you very much, everybody. The trio of that tune is just one of those ragtime themes that makes you want to jump for joy. I've always loved that. Oh, I see Harry Traxler is the first one who has mentioned King Chanticleer. I thought that might come up tonight. As soon as I get the energy, Harry, I'll play it for you. Now, let's see. Well, and as such, I'd like to do a slow rag. This just occurred to me today. It fits in with the animals. We're going to do another bird rag. John Arpin used to joke that there's a whole separate group of music that is ragtime ornithology, ornithological rags. And this one came out of San Francisco the same year as the last tune, 1916, written by a man named Thomas Pitts. It's the Meadowlark rag. And that's the Meadowlark rag. Thank you, folks. I've heard people play that more up-tempo as well, but that's one of those rags I was talking about that just seems to beg for a little bit more of a concert treatment with musicality and rubato and so forth. Most rags were written as dance music, though, so you couldn't do that. And I did, Gustavo. Yeah, I'm going to do some novelties. Maybe I should do Bird's Carnival. I'd like to kind of go through the history of American music, though, and play my concerts in almost a chronological fashion. So let's do an early blues tune now by W.C. Handy, the father of the blues, who lived in Memphis. And maybe some of you already know what's coming. I think it fits for tonight. We're going to do the Yellow Dog Blues. And right in the middle of it, another tune by Shelton Brooks called I Wonder Where My Easy Rider's Gone. Mae West sang that tune in one of her movies. And the Yellow Dog Blues is based on that other song. The melody is pretty similar. And the Yellow Dog Blues, which is written in D major, oddly enough. That's kind of how that goes. Oh, Joe, I didn't think of Snaky Blues either. I might play that. Okay, let's do Yellow Dog first. It was actually named for a railroad, the Yazoo Delta Line in Mississippi, and the nickname for it was the Yellow Dog Line. So this is the Yellow Dog Blues, originally called the Yellow Dog Rag. that's Yellow Dog Blues. Thank you very much, folks. You know, I think I will play Snaky Blues. This is for my friend Joe Sell, who lives in Arizona. Joe and I have been pen pals since I was 12 years old, and we met because he collects Johnny Maddox records. Joe is also an incredible artist who primarily does pencil drawings. And I just loved your last drawing and your letter, Joe. I appreciate it. He's one of the only friends I have that still writes me physical letters. I always try and write him back, at least on email. And if you look at my Facebook page, on the top, what is it called? The wall photo or something? What is it called? I don't know. If you look at the top of it, I have as the main picture there the pencil drawing that Joe did of me. So now you all know about Joe, and you know about his artwork. It's really incredible. Methinks Joe is underrated. Anyhow, let's do this tune that he happened to mention. It's one that Johnny used to play, called the Snaky Blues, and it became a favorite of my grandmother's too. Believe it or not, I played it at her funeral. But it was written in 1915 by the man who was the pianist with W.C. Handy's orchestra. His name was Will Nash, and it has kind of an unusual bass pattern in it. It's really more like a piano rag than a blues. In fact, on the cover of the music, it says an etude in ragtime. That's the Snaky Blues. Thank you very much, folks. Oh, greetings there to Dave Tucker. He's in Colonial Beach, Virginia. Haven't seen you in so long. We miss you, Dave. Before I leave the realm of traditional ragtime and go into some of the novelties and the music of the 1920s, let me play one more rag for you, and I knew I would get requests for this tonight. Oh man, Leo, I do know Teddy Bear Blues by heart, believe it or not. Maybe I'll play that for you. First, let's get Tiger Rag out of the way, shall we? And I have played this, different arrangements of it over the years. I played it in different ways, different keys, and the arrangement that I did in the Old Time Piano Championship, part of that I may have borrowed from Marty Mincer in Iowa, who's the ragtime apple farmer, but I've decided I kind of like the Jelly Roll Morton arrangement the best, so that's what I've been playing this summer while I've been working at the Diamond Bell. And I have added on to this arrangement the original French quadrilles on which the first part of the piece is based. So that's what you're going to hear first, are these dances that were popular in New Orleans in the early 1900s. The first part of Tiger Rag is based on these French quadrilles. So see what you think of this. Tiger Rag. And there's Tiger Rag. Thank you very much, folks. Oh, what's next on the list? Oh boy. Well, it's just past 7 o'clock here in Durango, and usually about this time I make another announcement that I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo. And if you don't trust those, I also have a P.O. box on my website for checks. A lot of people prefer that, and I don't blame you. My goodness, got some folks watching from Brazil tonight. Well, that is besides my regular listener, Gustavo. What am I going to pull out next? Let's do something easy. I saw a request a while back for Alleycat. So, let's do, yeah. Oh, no, you know what I'll do is, yeah, let's do Alleycat, and then I'll get in Teddy Bear Blues for Leo. Alleycat is one of the newer tunes in my repertoire. I used to get more requests for it, but it's kind of been forgotten, I think. It was a huge honky-tonk piano hit, and came out in 1962. It was written by a man from Denmark, believe it or not. Alleycat. And there's Alleycat. Thank you so much. I know I saw a request for that from a lady in Australia that I know. Leo, I hope you're still listening. This is Leo Roth from Missouri. He asked me about a tune called the Teddy Bear Blues. Let me play that for you now. This is, yeah, Sharon, yeah, I'm glad you got to hear that. Teddy Bear Blues was written in 1919 and published in San Francisco. Don't know much about the man that wrote it, but Johnny is one of the people that revived it in the 1950s. He did it for Dot Records, transposed it into B flat. I kind of like it in that key myself. It fits under the hands better, so it's a cute tune. Let's do the Teddy Bear Blues. thank you, folks. At least I was able to cover teddy bears there. I didn't want to play Teddy Bear's Picnic all over again. Now, let's do something a little different. I'm going to play a piece of music that I have not performed in a number of years. The idea just occurred to me because the only tune I could think of about for dogs was the Yellow Dog Blues. Yeah, we're going to do some novelty piano now from the 1920s, and there's two written by a man named Ted Shapiro, who was Sophie Tucker's piano player for decades, and he wrote some pop songs as well. His biggest hit was a ballad that came out in the late 20s, which is called "If I Had You." That may be familiar to you. And he wrote two novelty piano solos. And the funniest thing is they have very similar titles. The first one was called "A Dog on the Piano." And this one has a little bit different meaning to it. It's called "Putting on the Dog," 1923, a novelty by Ted Shapiro. And I played this in the Old Time Piano Championship. I think it was one of the years that I won the contest. So I figured it was about time to dust off this tune. "Putting on the Dog" by Ted Shapiro. And it's not easy. This is a very challenging piece of music. It's written in the key of D flat, very technically difficult. "Putting on the Dog." Thank you so much, folks. Well, I think that was worth dusting off, don't you? And now, I'll see if I can, Gustavo, I'll see if I can play Bird's Carnival. That's one of the Zez Confrey novelties. We did Kitten on the Keys earlier. I'll see if I can do it. If I can get the opening chords, I know the rest of the piece, I swear. Close enough. This is one of the more obscure Confrey novelties. I believe it's from about 1936, and I've always loved it. I think the lesser-known Confrey works are underrated. So let me play this for you now. The Birds' Carnival. And that's the Birds' Carnival. Thank you, folks. I'm so glad you thought of that. Just checking both streams there. Sorry, I've got to do that once in a while. Well, name me some more requests here, folks. I'm looking on Facebook now. You know, it's funny, I don't have as many viewers on Facebook as I used to. When I first started doing virtual concerts in 2020, Facebook had by far more viewers, but it has been flipped for at least over a year now. I suppose YouTube is really a better video platform in a sense. Let's do the other tune that is sitting right here on the piano. I just pulled this out this afternoon because I thought it would be fun. From the early 1930s, a song written by a man named Harry Woods. I'll tell you more about him in a minute. And it's called Pink Elephants. It's really funny. Pink elephants on the table, pink elephants on the chair, pink elephants on the ceiling, pink elephants everywhere. I hit my head right in the bed and said a prayer. When I woke up again, what do you think was there? Pink elephants on the ceiling, pink elephants on the wall. A lavender alligator was running around the hall. Now I'm through making whoopee. I raised my hand and swore that I never intend to ever see those pink elephants anymore. I have a recording of Phil Harris singing this. And it's written by Mort Dixon and Harry Woods, 1932. Harry Woods was one of the great composers of the American songbook, and Harry Woods supposedly only had one arm, but he was able to compose all these terrific songs. Johnny Maddox even met him at a nightclub in New York called the Village Barn, and Harry Woods wrote a lot of songs that everyone still knows. He wrote Side by Side, I'm Looking Over a Four-Leaf Clover, and When the Red, Red Robin Comes Bob, Bob, Bobbing Along. I collect his songs and have a whole file on them. I'm trying to get all of them that I can find. He went to England and worked over there for a while. And apparently he was known for getting into fights. He had a bad temper. And his son told a very funny story about his father. This is a well-known story. Harry Woods wrote a big hit in the 30s called Try a Little Tenderness. So one day after his dad got into a fight in a bar, somebody asked him, who is that man? He said, oh, that's my father. He wrote Try a Little Tenderness. Well, now let's do Pink Elephants. And there's Pink Elephants. Thank you so much. Guy Lombardo's on the cover of that music. Boy, the Lombardo brothers certainly had a very long career. From the 1920s, he led that band well into the 50s, I assume. I don't know about 60s. And he was on TV. I've seen the reruns of the Guy Lombardo show on PBS. Well, Pink Elephants on Parade. Is that the song that was written for Dumbo, Amy? No, I don't. I've never played it. In fact, there were a couple of the songs from Dumbo that were never published. I do have copies of the music, the manuscripts, but I've never played that one. That's what made me think of playing this one tonight, was thanks to you mentioning that. Well, I haven't done Bye Bye Blackbird yet. That's on the list. What else do you want, folks? Go ahead and send in some requests for me tonight. I'm going to skip 12th Street Rag tonight because it really doesn't fit in with the Animal Songs theme. That's the theme for tonight's concert. Boy, a lot of viewers on YouTube. I appreciate that, folks. Go ahead and send in some requests, and I'm going to wait a minute here because it takes a minute, for it to come in through the chat. We could do Bye Bye Blackbird, and there's one other tune I thought about playing them tonight. I might go ahead and do it for you. Oh, that's not a half bad idea. Oh, that would be fun, doing the raccoon. Let me do that one for you, because I know the verse and the patter chorus to that. Like the White Cliffs of Dover, there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover. Some tunes like that, even if I can play a chorus for you, I really don't know how to do it, because if I just play one or two choruses and I only know it in one key, it's not a good enough performance. I have to kind of have an arrangement of the tune ahead of time. Let's do Doing the Raccoon. This was written by J. Fred Coots, the great songwriter who also wrote Love Letters in the Sand. It came out in 1928, was recorded by Rudy Valley and his Connecticut Yankees. And what else can I tell you about it? Well, the songwriter, J. Fred Coots, I believe was Danny Coots' great uncle. That is how they are related. Danny Coots is a fabulous drummer from Nashville, if you've never heard him. Well worth checking out. Now let's do Doing the Raccoon. There's Doing the Raccoon. I really didn't think I would get to raccoons as far as animal songs, but it fits. Those raccoon coats are what that's about, those popular things from the 1920s, you know. There were a lot of songs like that that were considered collegiate. Rudy Valley sang some of them, the collegiate songs of the 1920s. I love those. I suppose some of them are based on real college fight songs. I don't know. Well, I was thinking about playing another bird song, and this comes from a movie, and I haven't performed it in a while. It just occurred to me that it would fit, especially if I'm going to play Bye Bye Blackbird. Blackbird is kind of a sad song, so I thought I'd do, well, this one's kind of sad too. My Bluebirds Singing the Blues. And this was written for a W.C. Fields movie called International House, which was a early movie about television, believe it or not, in the 1930s. And a lot of stars, including Cab Calloway and Rudy Valley, were in the movie, and so was baby Rose Marie. And this song was written for her. I was lucky enough that I got to meet her twice and actually played the tune for her at her home, where she lived later on in Van Nuys, California. But the song was written by Ralph Ranger and Leo Robin, who were two of the incredible songwriters at Paramount Studios in the 1930s. Ralph Ranger's music is extremely sophisticated and beautiful. He wrote Love in Bloom for Bing Crosby, which Jack Benny later used as his theme song, for instance. Here's My Bluebirds Singing the Blues. singing the blues. Thank you, folks. If you've never seen it, just look on YouTube and you can see Baby Rosemary singing that tune. It's pretty remarkable. She had an incredibly jazzy voice for someone that was only 10 or 12 years old. And that's the same Rosemary who was on the Dick Van Dyke Show and Hollywood Squares as well. Oh, I've got an interesting question here. Do you know any Brazilian music that approaches ragtime? There is a lot of wonderful Brazilian music like that. I'm afraid I've never played any of it, and I don't like to perform something unless I know it fairly well or completely by heart. But I do love some of the Brazilian music, like Ernesto Nazaré and so forth. We could do Bye Bye Blackbird next. I thought I saw one other request I might know. Oh, yeah, I should have realized. Abadaba honeymoon. Why don't I do that for you? Hey, it's about a monkey and a chimp getting married. So Abadaba honeymoon counts. This is a great ragtime and vaudeville tune from 1914, written in part by Arthur Fields, who was a star of records in the acoustic era. And I pair it with another tune called Row, Row, Row from the Ziegfeld Follies, of course. And that's because both of these tunes were performed in a movie called 2 Weeks with Love in the 1950s by Debbie Reynolds and my late friend Carlton Carpenter. So here's Abadaba honeymoon and Row, Row, Row. Abadaba honeymoon. Thank you, folks. Let's see. Well, if you've never heard the words to that, I encourage you to check out my website. And I have recorded that on the duet CD I did with my friend Domingo Mancuello. We play two pianos and he sings a lot of these tunes. You can get the CDs all directly from my website. And I encourage you to check them out because they are a little bit more polished than some of these live stream concerts that I do where I'm not allowed to go back and fix wrong notes. Plus, a lot of work goes into those CDs. Well, since I've been talking about it, I better play Bye Bye Blackbird. It's one of the tunes that I would often use to end the night if I was playing in a jazz club or a hotel like I do here in Durango at the Strater Hotel. Bye Bye Blackbird, complete with the original verse, which I love and nobody hardly ever plays. And there's Bye Bye Blackbird. Thank you, folks. Well, we're drawing to the close of tonight's concert, and so I'm going to pull out this one last tune that I prepared for tonight for Lions, Tigers, in Rags. Oh my. Oh my. Haven't played any of the tunes about lions yet. So here from 1913 is the Lion Tamer Rag, a syncopated fantasia, and the composer's name on the music is Mark Janza. Well, that was a pseudonym for the music publisher. His real name was Al F. Marzian, and he was from Louisville, Kentucky. As I was learning this tune this week, I realized that it sounds a lot like circus marches and so forth. So we are talking about lion tamers after all. I guarantee you that Al Marzian, or Marzian, however you say it, was familiar with that kind of music. I'm sure a group like that probably came through Louisville, Kentucky in the early 1900s. That's part of what makes this piece really neat. It's a very unique rag. I want to thank a lady named Corey Sisk, who lives down in Albuquerque, for suggesting that I learn this tune this week. Her prodding kind of made me take the time and effort to do it. So here's the Lion Tamer Rag. thank you very much, folks. Well, thank you for listening tonight. I hope you have enjoyed lions, tigers, and rags, and blues, and pop songs, and more. And please tell your friends if they might like this kind of music, and I really do appreciate those virtual tips. It helps me with my career and allows me to keep playing this music and try and keep it alive. So thank you for listening. I'll be back next weekend with another virtual concert on Facebook and YouTube. Not quite sure what the theme will be yet, but I will announce it on Facebook as usual. See you next Sunday night. Thank you, folks.